Hello and welcome to Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel. Windsor author Claudio D'Andrea has been writing most of his life and presently writes for the Windsor Star and post-media content works. His short stories, poetry and non-fiction have appeared in many publications, and local publisher and author Marty Gervais praised Claudio as one of the most versatile writers in this community, and described Claudio as a committed and dedicated craftsman. Now, in 2024, Claudio has released his first book entitled Stories in the Key of Song, and we're going to hear all about it. Welcome to Scribes and Songsters.
Thank you, Veronique.
Well, that was quite a compliment you got from Marty Gervais.
It was wonderful and so flattering, and I'm honored.
Yeah, and you know, when you write, you put your heart in it, and you do all those things that writers do, and then you get that kind of appreciation. It's very gratifying, isn't it?
Very, yeah. Yes, it is. It can be a real vulnerable position, writing something or creating any artwork or piece of art and putting it out there, and you just don't know if anyone's listening or anyone connects with it. Yeah. So when you hear something like that from somebody like Marty, it is truly inspiring. And
you know, our words become so personal, and even in the editing process, you know, somebody slashes out 3 graphs of your work, and you want to weep. Yeah. So now, tell us a little bit about your background.
I'm born and raised in Windsor. I lived a couple of years in Vancouver. I worked out there at a couple of newspapers, community newspapers there, and then moved back.
Why would you move back from Vancouver?
Cost of living, first and foremost. Plus, it's a long, long way from home when you're away from loved ones, especially when you lose somebody like we did, unfortunately. And we missed the flight. We missed it by just a few days, our flight back. So it really drove home how far away we were. So, so mainly for those 2 reasons, that's why I decided to come back.
And so what did you do when you got back here?
Well, when I got back, a friend of mine, a former publisher, Terry McConnell, he was starting a newspaper in Tecumseh called Shoreline Week.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And he needed an editor, so timing-wise, it worked out well. So I started working there and was there for a couple of years, and then I started at the Windsor Star, and I've been there since.
So now, going back, when did you first realize, were you young when you realized that writing was going to be your career?
Yeah, I don't know if I can pinpoint exactly when. It's just something I've always loved to do. I know when I knew that I wanted to get into journalism, it was in high school, and I realized that I had to take a typing course, because if you're going to be a journalist, you need to know how to type. So I took that, and that would have been, I don't know, probably grade 10 or thereabouts. And then from there, just continued in my journalism field and then creative writing as well. So,
you know, learning to type, it is so critical when you're in the writing business. And we have a former colleague at the Windsor Star. I've never seen anyone type so quickly with 2 fingers as Gord Henderson.
It's funny you say that. I work with somebody like that too, Don Button, a former editor of mine, and 2-finger typist. And especially when we were on deadline, he called it the Rambo approach to journalism. And it would be like tat, 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 like a machine gun.
Yes.
It's crazy.
And when you say bang it out, they really did bang it out.
They literally did, yes.
So when did you sort of think of, or deciding that you wanted to write this particular book?
I don't know. The first short story in this book I wrote is probably around 10 years ago. And then I just was gradually writing short stories over the years, and knew at some point, I don't know exactly when, but I knew that I'd like to compile them. And it seemed to recognize that there was a theme going on with a lot of my stories. And I decided that I wanted to compile them into one whole. I think one of the things that really convinced me to get it going is just the realization that time moves on. And the first story, Bus Stop Bus Goes, I ended up mailing a copy to Alistair MacLeod, who is a former professor of mine and a wonderful writer. And I just wanted his opinion on it. Unfortunately, it was shortly before he died. So I sent it in the old-fashioned way in the mail and never heard a response. And then shortly after that, I heard about his death, unfortunately. So that really drove home the point that, I need to get this done and somehow get it out there.
There comes a point, doesn't there, when you realize that you're not 20 and time, it really ticks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the title is wonderful, Stories in the Key of Song. So fill us in.
Yeah, that just kind of, I don't know where that, well, I do know, I think I know where it came from, and it's from Stevie Wonder, his great album, Songs in the Key of Life, which has so many wonderful records. It's one of the greatest pop soul albums of all time. So I think that was in the back of my head, and I was listening to it, and so many of his songs are so important to me, so personal to me. But I was listening to the album, and I guess thinking about the title, and then somehow I thought of Stories in the Key of Song, and I thought that works because that's what these stories are. They're all musically inspired. They all relate to music in one way, shape, or form.
And music has been part of your life forever. Yeah. You were an old rocker.
I was, yeah.
I don't mean the old, you know.
No, I know.
From before.
From before, yes. From earlier times. I mean, a lot of people, I think, can relate to music. Not too far from here in Leamington, there was a program that aired on Sunday mornings, the Alfie Golini Show, which was a radio program, and they played Italian music. Every Sunday, my family would listen to that. We had a little radio sitting on top of our refrigerator in the kitchen, and Mom would put on that program on Sundays, often after church, and we would listen to all these Italian songs. So that was one of the early memories. And so, music's always been a part. And when I was in my teen years, I did jam with some friends, and we never quite got out of the garage, but hey, we had a lot of fun playing at the time. So
now there was one of the key of a sad song that was about your musical colleague, Peter
Mercenides, yeah. He was one of the members in our group. He was our keyboard player. And unfortunately, he died. He was early 30s, died tragically in a motorcycle accident. But he was extremely gifted. And our band members, especially our guitar players, learned so much from him because he had this wealth of knowledge, and he just inspired us so much. Wonderful person and a wonderful musician.
You in the book you talk about an interview you watched that Charlie Rose did with Martin Amis. Tell us about that. What was inspiring about that? I mean, two people I think who are absolutely fabulous.
I think what I liked about that interview, and it's something that Marty Gervais says about this book, reminded me of it. Marty said that in my writing, there's a musicality in the words themselves, not just in the content, the themes or what have you, but just to the music of the words. And that's, I think, what Martin Amis was getting at in his interview.
I was really delighted. You spoke with our journalism students and you talked about that. And I was really happy because I always try to impress on them that, words are really magical. And if we pay attention to everything we say and, sort of read, and I always say to them, when you read your work out loud, you'll understand whether or not anyone is going to want to read it or listen to it. Mm-hmm. Because if you've put that music magic in your words, it'll be there.
I think so. I hope so. But yeah, I do agree. There's something valuable about the written word. I mean, I guess it can be in a digital format too. It's still writing, I suppose, but it's especially when it's in a print format, though. I mean, it's a recording. It's something that is left, that we leave behind, and I think that's important. It's important for me, and I think a lot of people, a lot of writers, certainly feel that the same way. That it's important to put that down in record, like in some kind of a record form.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, in Stories in the Key of Song, you write an introduction to each of the short stories, which I thought was a very interesting device.
Yeah.
So tell us why you decided to do that.
Well, it's not my idea. I stole it. Neil Gaiman, the famous writer, I saw that he did that. In his books of short stories, he doesn't preface the short stories themselves with introductions, but he writes a long introduction to the books, and in them he writes a sort of introduction to each story, or he talks about each story. And I just thought that was so cool, because a lot of times we come into stories cold. We don't know anything about it. We don't know what inspired it, where the author was when he was or she was thinking about it. And so when Neil Gaiman wrote those little tidbits, it's sort of like opening the door a little bit to his creative imagination, and I thought that was so cool. And then thinking back to some of the stories in there, it's funny because I think of what inspired some of them, and some of them are just strange phenomena or strange occurrences or people that I may have seen or whatever, but there's all kinds of different types of inspiration or the effect that they, a particular story may have had on me. And I found it important just to share that with the readers. So,
as I was reading through it, I thought, introductions in books where they have a lot of time jumps, where you're sort of going back 20 years or 25 years, and you're going forward again.
Yeah.
Some introduction to those, I think, for readers who find that confusing, I think it might sort of help them prepare to read these time jumps.
Yeah. I hopefully, because there are time jumps. Like these stories were written over a period of 10 years, so sometimes I had to go back in time and put them in certain moments. Yeah.
So when you have all of these little inspirations, do you write them down right away, or what's your process? Or do you have one?
I don't really have a process, but one story, Passatempo, the thing that really kind of triggered or inspired that or got me going was just this phenomena of charging a cell phone or any device. And I don't know about you, but I always found it strange. You go to power up, charge your iPhone or what have you, and it goes up to 80%, 90%, and then it goes to 99 and stays stuck there seemingly forever and doesn't go past 99. And I always found that really strange. And then I thought, well, I can use that as a plot device for like a mystery or a horror, and I use that for that story. Another one, Switch Sides. I was walking down Olette Avenue, and I saw a car driving down the road. It was a GTO Mitsubishi, which is a Japanese make, I believe. And the steering wheel was on the other side of the car. And that's something you never see in Windsor. And I just, it was just so bizarre seeing this driver driving down, on the other side. And that got me thinking, what would it be like if a person all of a sudden decided to switch up all her habits and do everything using the other, left hand, if she carries a purse on her right the other way, or if she eats her dinner with the right hand using the left. And so that's where inspired that. Another one, I Mean Mine.
Sorry, that one was a bit Kafka-ish.
Yeah. Well, Kafka was much on the mind at the time. Yeah. The metamorphosis. So, there's a line in the Pink Floyd song, there's someone in my head, but it's not me. Sometimes I wonder where these things come from, and maybe it is Kafka or somebody living in there. But, yeah, so, it's just different things. And bus stop, bus goes. It was just as simple. It was a ride to work on a bus one morning. And all of a sudden I thought of this particular character with this troubled past and what it would be like if she struck up a conversation with a stranger and sort of revealed all these dark secrets in her life. And so
what I love dialogue in books. Yeah. And I thought, I always think using dialogue is a device that makes the book just truck along so quickly. What made you decide on the dialogue rather than just sort of writing the story about these two?
Well, again, as I write in the book, some of these stories are experimental. So I think that was the first story that appears in the book, and it was probably the first story that I wrote years ago, or when I got back into creative writing. So, and I thought, I'm not sure why. I just thought I'd like to try it almost as a play, but just try it as a dialogue between two persons. And so that was just the method that I chose for that particular story.
When I was reading it, and after I'd finished, I thought you could see this as like a video vignette, like a short film, if you know what I mean.
It's funny you say that because I'm working on a film
oh, really?
of that. I was approached by a friend of mine, Walter Rigi, who does a lot of video and audio productions.
Brilliant man.
Yeah, and he said he wanted to do a video of one of my works. So I thought, okay, well, I've never really done any kind of film script or written one, but so I thought, let me think about it. And I went back into some of the work that I've written, and I looked at that story and I thought, this I think can be easily adaptable as a film script. So I tried it, rewrote it as a film script, and we've gone over a couple of readings right now, and he's been great to work with. He helps me see it in a different way because it's a different type of writing.
He certainly is.
Entirely. And then other people have climbed on board as well. I have sponsorship from Transit Windsor. So, it's in-kind sponsorship that they've agreed to let me use one of their buses and a bus driver for that episode. And also I have involvement of Christian Vey, who's a local musician, songwriter, actor, model, terrific guy, super talented. And I was floored when he agreed not only to be in a cameo role in there, but he said he would record an original song for it, and help me in all kinds of ways with it. So yeah, that's we're right in the process of getting going with that. I'm really excited. I really want to start shooting in the winter and get it going.
I love those two characters.
Oh, thank you.
Really. I love to read and see pictures. And that story, I really saw pictures.
Thank you.
And at the end, I thought, wow, this would sort of be a cool short film.
Yeah. I hope
congratulations
so.
with all of that. That's terrific.
Thank you.
Now, before, I'd like you to read a piece, but before we do, there's a chapter about your name.
Yeah, my dreaded name. It's funny. I've always had a love-hate relationship with my name. I ended up taking on a pen name years ago when I was doing some freelance writing, and it was Paul Rigi. Rigi's my mom's maiden name, and Paul was my confirmed name. So partly it was to get away from that, albatross or that name Claudio, but I've learned to be okay with it. I'm at peace with it, and so I kind of it's a kind of a fun piece. I thought it was a fun way to just introduce the book as well, just a little bit about my name and what my thoughts were about it. But yeah, it was just discovering the history of it, and a librarian who enlightened me about Claudius, my namesake.
I Claudius.
Yeah, I Claudius, and that's why I called it I Lame. But then I realized that it literally means lame or crippled. And I thought, wow, that's quite a legacy, right? But so, it's a little bit of self-effacing humor there. So, and
there's a bit of a cloud reference that one of your friends.
My
cumulus.
I had a cousin who used to refer to me as cumulus, and when you're a pudgy little guy and you're called cumulus, it stings a bit. Yeah. But he was a good guy, and I was okay with it. So.
Why don't you read? Do you have a favorite passage?
Sure.
Because there's so many things in there that you could read. That
I'll read one from. Story called Carol's Last Christmas. In this passage, the main character's name is Carol, and Carol is a man who's living in a retirement home, and it's called Eden Easier Retirement Home. And in this passage, he's dreaming about his wife Bella. And he's recalling an incident or a memory between the two. So I'll read from that. It's like a metaphor for life, the waltz. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Two people, but it's as though there's always a third person or force that tries to interfere or that you have to deal with. You have to dance with that third person and stay connected as a couple. Sounds complicated, Carol said as Bella rushed to put the needle on an album. Over the speakers, the singers started. In Napoli, where love is king, when boy meets girl, here's what they say. Bodo, bodo, bum, 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 bum. When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore. Bella grabbed Carol's arms and started leading him in the dance. He stumbled and bumped his right knee hard against hers, cursing before Dean Martin got to the next that's amore. He pushed off from Bella and cupped his sore knee. You need to find another partner, he hissed. Another dance partner. Bella, frustrated at how quickly he gave up on anything fun and unscripted, had enough. Carol, one day you're going to figure out that it's not always about you, that the world's not that into you. And when you do, you'll discover humility in your own humanity and become a better person for it. Bella paused for a moment and repeated, the world's not that into you. She liked the phrasing and what it signified. Later, she would develop it into the title and theme of a self-help book that would become a bestseller. A loud snort brought Carol back to the present and in his small room at Eden Easier Retirement Home. He had mistaken his snore for an intruder. He looked around. There was no Bella in the room, no apartment. He was confused. He looked down at the bowl, at the partially spilled porridge on his robe and lap, and cursed as he got up to grab a small towel to clean himself. Bella, he said out loud, you were too good for this world and certainly too good for me.
It's the sort of character that you wanted to go and have a cup of tea with him.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yes.
But he could be ornery and miserable too. Mm-hmm. So I think I'd rather have the cup of tea with Bella.
Yeah. So you talked about switch sides. The next story, Mexican Siesta, is a continuation.
Yeah, that happens a couple of times in this series where something in one story I pick up on and it continues in another one. I did that in another story where I had a character by the name of Claudio who was writing fan fiction to Alice Cooper. And in the follow-up story, he becomes the main character. The full name is Claudio D'Andrea, who may or may not be me. I don't know. But so in that particular story, I realized I'd like for the husband in that story to continue with his story in the follow-up story that was in the book. So
the other one, another one, server outrage. One of the things, I mean, is it true that it actually takes the equivalent of 30 nuclear plants to power computer infrastructure?
Yes, according to that New York Times article, yes, it did. And that just blew my mind. I couldn't believe all the energy that goes into just cooling these things.
Just cooling, that's the thing. It's not even keeping them running.
No. So I just thought... that's strange.
And I love what grew out of that.
Well, and again, speaking of what started that was just an email message, because we would get these from our tech support people, and this was at work, and the subject line was server outage tomorrow, right? And so they're just informing us that servers would be offline on a particular day. But one day I'm looking at server outage, and my mind kind of my eyes played a trick on me, and I read it as outrage, server outrage. And then I linked the two, that New York Times piece, and I thought, well, what would happen if the servers were indeed outraged and decided to seek revenge against and then the whole idea of servers, who's the server, who's the master. So,
You wrote about a feud between Julie Andrews and Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
Is it true?
No, that was entirely fictional. But what inspired that was listening to an old Alice Cooper song called Halo of Flies. And as the song was playing, again, it's in waltz rhythm, 3/4 time, but which I love. But anyway, I'm listening to one of his lyrics, and it reminded me of Julie Andrews' My Favorite Things. And so I'm starting in my, you get these brainworms, and then afterwards, I'm playing Halo of Flies, but interspersing Julie Andrews' lyrics in there. Yeah.
So do you have a favorite story in there?
Maybe that one, the Julie Andrews versus Alice Cooper. It seemed to work, I think, in a lot of ways, and I just like the way that came together.
My favorite sick things.
Yeah, my favorite, even that, just that expression.
Yes.
I thought, well, if he's going to create something, what is it going to be called? My favorite sick things. Yeah.
So now, where can people get your book?
Well, it's available at blackmosspress.com, but it's also available at Biblioasis and River Books in Amherstburg. They can go to my website too. There's links to where they can order it. So yeah, there's different places.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
This has been great.
Likewise. Thank you.
Well, unfortunately, that's it for another edition of Scribes and Songsters. Many thanks to our most interesting guest, Claudio D'Andrea. Thanks to our Scribes and Songsters team, producer Brian Sweet and technical producer and editor Gary Glass. Grateful thanks to Tony Toldo and the Toldo Foundation, and to Neil and Tina Queering for their support. Thank you for watching. Hope to see you soon, right back here on Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel. Bye for now.